Good. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the third pre-production talk of the festival season 2011. My name is Kate Mosse. I'm a novelist and a fledgling playwright and one of the founders of the Orange Prize for Fiction, which celebrates international writing by women, but more importantly, a Chichester girl born and bred. Yay, exactly. And it is my enormous pleasure and honour to be here to do the pre-production talk tonight for two reasons. First is that this is the very first time that Max Stafford-Clark has been to Chichester, and we've been waiting for a very long time. So it's a great pleasure to everybody here to finally have a play directed by you, Max. But it's also because the play, Top Girls, which is previewing at the moment and has press night in a couple of nights, is just brilliant, and I saw it last night. And it's one of those plays that many of us as students saw when it first was performed under Max Stafford-Clark's directorship at the Royal Court in 1982. And I had not seen it again till last night, and I think this one was even better. I can say that because it's the same director.
Well, I noticed the cheer you got for being a Chichester girl.
Yeah, that's right.
So I should make it clear that I was brought up in Bognor Regis for the first time.
And in the context of what we're talking about, social change, poverty, the way things, he wins. Coming from Bognor beats Chichester, hands down. I'm not going to tell you everything that Max Stafford-Clark has achieved in theatre, because you need to both buy the programme, but also all of Max's books, which are for sale afterwards. There is a book running on how many we're going to sell, so you need to buy them, and I'm not going to tell you who is going to get the bet.
And there is an enormous discount.
Enormous discount, in true Chichester style, because we haven't got very long this evening, and we are particularly lucky to have the almost all the cast here. One missing, doing her makeup, and the various top girls will leave as we go on in order to get their wigs on.
We are prisoners of wigs and wardrobe, and you think you're in charge of the production, then when you get into the theatre you realise that actually wigs and wardrobe are in charge, and they will disappear gradually to wigs and wardrobe.
So it will be like the final scene in what is it, Sound of Music, when everybody leaves the stage. So please don't feel that anybody is bored. But one of the things that's so exciting this evening is that you're going to see a director who directed the debut of Top Girls in 1982 doing it again. And it's a very rare experience for many of us to see the same play directed by the same person nearly 30 years apart. So one of the things before we start I'd just like to know, and I know Max would like to know, is how many of you have either seen the play here or before in the Royal Court on either its incarnations, or read the script? Yeah.
Oh.
Is that pleasing to you, Max, or disappointing?
No, that's surprising, but gratifying.
So one of the things about directing a play, again, Max, I assume, is you are well known for your workshop process, having worked with Carol Churchill on many different productions, from Light Shining in Buckinghamshire onwards. Did you want to revisit Top Girls 30 years on because of the play, because you wanted to try it again, or because you felt the time was now right for it to be done again?
Well, I didn't feel I'd got anything conspicuously wrong the first time and needed to sort it out. But no, it was a play that I loved doing, and Carol wrote it in 80, 81, and we performed it in 82, and that was the beginning of Mrs. Thatcher came to power in 1979, so it seemed apposite to do it at the beginning of another Tory regime. And whatever reservations you have and I have about the Blair-Brown government, the poverty gap, and that the poverty line is half that of the average national income. The numbers below the poverty line trebled under Mrs. Thatcher, increasing from thanks to Tim for these statistics, from 5 million in 1979 to 14.1 million in 1992. They declined to under 12 million under the Labour administration and are now increasing again. So an alternative to Top Girls as a title would be Bottom Girl, and that would be Angie, played by Olivia Poulet, who, when the play contrasts under Thatcherism, the opportunities for those who are going to make it and those who like Marlene, feel that Thatcherism gives them an opportunity for independence and an opportunity to escape a working class background, and those like Angie who aren't going to make it, for whom the opportunities decrease under that kind of a regime. So that's the thesis of the play, and it seemed a particularly politically apposite time to be doing the play again. Also, it was a play that I loved. It had not been seen in London for over 10 years, and I dreamt about revisiting it, and it has been as pleasurable as I ever imagined it would be.
Before I ask ladies of the cast to actually say what their experience has been, one more question about that, Max, is did you decide that you would go back and work with Carol Churchill and workshop it again? Did you feel there were things that needed to be changed or anything that needed to be modernised? How did the process work about deciding that you were going to direct it again?
Well, it is a historical play just as much as any restoration play or of it set in its particular period. I didn't want to change that. Carol herself has an ambivalent attitude towards the reviving of her work. I mean, she finds it a burden to see plays again and again, and she's seen this play around the world many times. And it was recently done a year ago in New York, I think, and she has re-edited the play slightly, so that the second act that you'll see tonight, if you're seeing it, is in fact Angie's story, and is a slight re-editing from how it was when we first did it 29 years ago. I mean, I think Carol is a wonderful writer, but the irony is that on one level, she's had an enormously successful career, but if, on the other hand, you write in order to change the world, and the world stays the same stubbornly, then you don't regard yourself as a success. So Carol went through, I think, with Blue Heart and This Is a Chair, which were plays, I suppose, in the mid-90s, a period of writing anti-plays, because I think she was disappointed with what theatre could achieve. I mean, I'm putting words into her mouth, and I'm sure she wouldn't express it quite like that, but that's my feeling anyway.
When I was sort of reading Taking Stock, just reminding myself of the story of Top Girls and how it had come about, there was a note in your diary saying that you thought it was the, quote, best play you'd ever directed. And is that one of the reasons that you wanted to go back to it, just to sort of remind yourself of a really great piece of work?
Of course. Well, as Marlene says in the play, success is very ... So say it.
Success is very...
That's right.
And then I get cut off by about 3 different women telling me what success is about.
So, yes, revisiting success is... I mean, Ian Dury was a great friend of mine, and he said, he was doing a concert one. He said, if they ask me to sing, hit me with your rhythm stick, one more, and I won't say exactly what he said because this is a Chichester audience, but one more something time, I'll scream. So as a rock star, you get asked again and again to revisit the back catalogue. As a director, it's an occasional privilege.
For those of you who have not yet seen it or read it, it is complicated as a structure in that there is an imaginary dinner party with the women from history at the beginning, hosted by Marlene, who is herself. And then it's the Top Girls agency, although there have been some changes to the second act, I believe. So it starts with Angie, so she is very focused. And then the last act, of course, is a year before. Now, this is a lot to ask of an audience. Yeah. And I don't know whether, Max, did you feel a sense of needing to make it clear for the audience what's going on, or do you feel that the characters and the way that it works is in the hands of the actors to deliver that to the audience?
Well, both really. I think the audiences do have to work quite hard, and that, Carol, one of the characteristics of her work is that often she brings separate worlds together in the play. So Cloud 9, for example, the first act is set in 1890 East Africa, and the second act is set in 1965 South London. And they're 2 separate worlds inhabited by the same characters who've only aged 20 years in a 90-year gap. So she brings two worlds together. And in this play, as we said, she brings three worlds together. The world of the little girls in the back garden, the surreal world of Marlene's dinner party, and then Marlene's real life in the employment agency. And it's not until page 56 out of 90 that Angie arrives in the office, and you see the one world colliding with another. And I think that's one of Carol's characteristics, is that she leaves the exposition. I mean, she withdraws exposition from the audience so that they really have to work to make it up themselves. So I think the audience, I mean, obviously as a director, any play you do, you try to make as clear as possible. But I think this one particularly needs clarity because it is, and I'm aware that you have to look carefully at the programme to see that Act 3 is a year earlier than Act 1 and 2. And there is a dress that Marlene gives to Angie, which the year before she fits, and a year later when she wears it, it's too small for her. and Carol said, listen, that's how the audience will know. I said, don't be ridiculous. How will they know that it's a sign? But in fact, somebody, a friend who came and saw it last night, said, I knew exactly that it was a year earlier by the dress.
Are you ever tempted, though, Matt, because you worked so much with Carol and indeed with other playwrights on the text, did you feel at any point that because we were 30 years on and many of the references to an audience in 2011 might not be as clear as they would have been to an audience in 1982, whether it's references to Maggie, or did you feel tempted to either put a surtitle up about what timing was on or make any concessions to the passage of time?
No, not really. I mean, in rehearsal, there was a series called The British at Work, which had been going on, and it was, I contacted the producer of that and asked if he would give us a special showing of the 80s. And indeed, in that, there was a woman who became head of an employment agency, and she came in and talked to the cast. But the script wasn't altered, but it illuminated, I mean, the way she talked about her work and the commission system that they worked under was enormously helpful, I think. Yeah. And how you conducted an interview, the body language, all that was very helpful. But no, I think that part of the challenge, particularly for a Chichester audience, is to understand the structure of it. I mean, Carol's work is not easy and certainly her plays always have a formal experimentation, and indeed the overlapping dialogue that is characteristic of this play is something she pioneered in a one-act play called 3 More Sleepless Nights.
Although someone said last night to me, I just don't understand why the director directed you to talk over each other.
Absolutely.
I said, no, it was the writer. Oh, I see. Right, okay.
But the audience response I've cherished most is the first act is in the restaurant, and the second act, the audience come in and they're confronted with 2 hay bales, and it's get the little girls in the back garden, although the little girls, of course, aren't there yet. And one man turned to his wife and said in despair, "Oh God, now where are we?"
But there is, and I can't remember whether this is the decision that was made for this production or whether this is part of the integral direction. But there is wonderful projection at the beginning of this production of great and well-known women from history, and some less so. And I felt that very much set the context for the historical characters who were about to walk on. Now, was that something new for this, Max, or was that something that you and Carol talked about, having that sort of, cavalcade of women, I suppose, beforehand?
No, but I was aware when I first discussed the set with Tim that behind that, Tim Shortall, the designer, that there are steps down. And we talked about the restaurant being somewhere like Notting Hill in a basement and people. So I knew that the characters would be seen as they descended the steps and framed, indeed, in the doorway at the top of the steps before they came into the restaurant. So that gave me a visual opportunity to present each character before they arrived. But no, I don't think we talked about it beyond that.
Yes, for those of you who for the recording, we are supposed to be recording this, but I don't know that we've picked it up. But that's very interesting because it felt to the audience that I was in last night that people were already engaging with the principles of the sense that there were experiences of women's lives that had been the same, essentially, for hundreds and thousands of years. And people were trying to spot people that they recognised. Yeah. And that, for me, therefore, felt that people were engaging with the play even before it had started.
That's quite fun. I enjoy looking at them. And I mean, Frida Kahlo is somebody I have got to know since seeing that.
Yes, the eyebrows have it. There was also, I know in the original, and that Carol Churchill had left it open, that because of this unusual structure, that the play could be done with one interval, having Act 1 and Act 2 and then an interval, or equally with the less fashionable nowadays, I suppose, dual interval. Why did you decide to have the 2 intervals between each of the acts?
Well, that was her idea. I'm, in principle, never in favour of 2 intervals, because it gives the audience twice the opportunity to escape.
Twice the ice cream sales, I think.
Yeah. But no, the re-edit of the material, I mean, the script is exactly the same as it was in 1982, but in a slightly different order. Act 2 successfully tells Angie's story, and you get the contrast between the rather slow-moving world of the 2 little girls in the back garden with the hyper-sharp edges and glib dialogue of the girls in the office right up bang against each other. So I like that very much. And I think the re-edit in that sense is very successful. With the
comment that Max made earlier about disappointment of writers, if the purpose has been to change the world, can theatre do that or not? Do you feel as actors that you have had you've touched on it, your opinions of where we are now changed by being in this play? I mean, it sounded like you were all saying that it had been quite a significant experience beyond enjoying the play and, the production itself.
I'm afraid my feelings have just been consolidated rather than changed. What I suppose we'd call the feminist movement has not really achieved what it might have hoped to have achieved since the 1960s. So yes, that was another reason why I wanted to do the play, because I did find it quite bleak that I was reading a play written in 1981 that really could have been written today. So yeah, that's what it did for me.
But one of the things that I thought was quite interesting from the audience point of view is that people, in a way, do expect, and you might all say this is not what you expect, but I feel that often audiences want to go away with the full stop very clear in their mind. Now, apart from the challenges of the structure and the political subject matter and the updating, the ending of the play is one of those extraordinary moments, that one single word. And I wonder, Olivia, if you would, because it falls to you, did you feel like you were finishing the play or starting a whole new train of thought? Did you debate about how to say the final lines?
Yeah, and I'm still debating, much to Max's chagrin, probably. Yeah.
No, you're not.
We talked about it at length, about whether... Because there's discussion again in the audience about whether Angie's overheard this whole argument. Is she asleep? Is she sort of half sleepwalking? What's filtered into her head? Well, the debate we did have was I was saying that she's saying frightening about this dream that she's had. But obviously in a more Brechtian sense, she's saying frightening that I'm not going to leave home probably, and I'm not going to get a job, and I'm not going to succeed. But yeah, we have debated that quite a bit, haven't we?
Yes, the overview, of course, is that frightening applies to the decade ahead, which Angie can't possibly know about. But yes, she's. I saw a production in Bulgaria on the eve of, which of course I didn't understand a word of, except, it's all right, I've got one.
Yeah, no, he's got his own, you see, there we are.
Privilege, you see. of course, I didn't understand a word of it, except I knew exactly what was happening. But frightening, it was on the verge of communism collapsing. It was still a communist-run theatre. But frightening, in that context, applied to the communism that had been, and that's what the audience understood, rather than the opportunities that capitalism would and the free market would provide to those countries ahead. So that Carol's message was absolutely turned on its head by the context of that production. But no, the last line, frightening, is, for the actress, absolutely applies to the dream the little girl's been having. But in the context of the play, applies to the future where bottom girls are just not going to make it.
I also think it's a very brilliant technique to finish either a play or a book or a film on that kind of ambivalent note. I mean, I don't remember the endings of films or plays where it's all been resolved. But I remember 2 films I saw a number of years ago now, There Will Be Blood and Lions for Lambs. Lions for Lambs literally finishes in the middle of a sentence, and then it just goes black. And I just spent the rest of the evening going, oh my God, what does that mean? I mean, I literally thought about that film so much. And There Will Be Blood. It's the way Daniel Day-Lewis says the last line, because he doesn't inflect it the way one would expect.
For an ending.
Oh my God. It's so clever, and it does mean that the audience goes away, I think, much more stimulated and provoked than if we all just went, oh, and there we go, and that's the conclusion.
Is there anything that you have learnt from redoing it again? Not learnt, but got out of it that you were not expecting?
Well, I think that, Tim here has given me a list of statistics, which just read a selection of them. But I think that the point that the ladies have made, which is how, in The Guardian last week, there was the case of a woman who had been made redundant while she was pregnant and who had successfully sued the company she was working for, and how there is still a glass ceiling for women in many fields. 9% of directors of the UK's top companies, 100 companies, are women. 19% of MPs in Parliament are women. 9% of editors of national newspapers. 8% of trade union general secretaries or equivalent. So,
and 1 in 5 single women pensioners risk being in poverty in retirement. Retired men, on average, have between £50 to £100 per week more private pension. Women are more likely to experience persistent poverty. More than 1/5 of women, 22%, have persistent low income compared to only 14% of men. And
so these figures go on, but I suppose it does rub home the lesson that things have changed but not necessarily moved forward spectacularly.
And also, in the play, there is this sense of you're facing 2 types of feminism, aren't you? Individualism versus collectivism, and that the individual will not deliver for anybody in the end. And in a way, that was why Marlene. Obviously, it's awful to look one to a chair and use the character name, but it's easier for everybody. But I was interested. She felt a much warmer character than the actor 29 years ago, and that seemed to me wonderful because it wasn't quite as easy.
Carol is a sufficiently sophisticated playwright to make it a debate between the 2 women. I mean, it's an argument, but at the same time as trying to just bludgeon the other character, they are trying to convert them. So Joyce, the character that Stella plays, who's just gone, is someone who has been influenced by her father, who was a agricultural trade unionist, we understand. And so she's, labour through and through. And Marlene has cut herself free from this background.
Unfortunately, we are going to have
but
to...
I think, as we said to each other in rehearsal, who would you rather spend a weekend with, Marlene or Joyce? I think Marlene in her London flat, with access to...
untold amounts of alcohol, as far as I could see.
Yes.
The drinking scene at the beginning. We have got to finish. But that we've only been able to, particularly because we were so lucky to have most of the cast here as well, just give you a flavour of some of the things that have come up in the rehearsal process and what Max and Tim have been doing to bring this play back. But I just wondered, you know, Tim as director and Max, is there any last things you want to say to this audience who are going to mostly, I think, are you mostly coming in to see it tonight or soon? You're all coming in, aren't you? Is there any piece of advice you want to give this audience, apart from buying your books, which Max is going to sign outside when we finish this? You know, is there a sense of...
Tim?
I suppose to keep an open mind. Structurally, as Max was saying, the play is still quite unique in terms of overlapping dialogue and often seemingly unexplained juxtapositions of scenes, certainly until about halfway through. The full shape of the structure doesn't make itself clear. So it's to just enjoy it and to bear with it, I suppose.
Be patient with it, yes, I think is important.
I think you will, apart from anything else, have for those of us who are around 50, the soundtrack is a blast from the past. It's wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, Max Stafford-Clark and Tim Hall.
Thank you very much.